Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about how I helped someone who was falsely accused of drug trafficking. This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. All right, well, this sounds like it is a story, which is what I'm interested in. So what happened?
Well, our client was going to move to Gillette, and he was going to rent an apartment with his girlfriend. They just had been dating for a few months and they decided to move in together. So he sold a lot of his possessions that he really didn't need, and he borrowed a friend's pickup and loaded up what he wanted to bring to town and rolled into town. Unfortunately, he was speeding, and when he pulled into the gas station, one of our local law enforcement officers came up to him and just, started to write him a citation for speeding, and then it kind of went all downhill from there. So far in the story, he's been stopped for speeding, which is not that serious an offense, but it sounds like, did he have drugs in the car or something? Yes, so he was moving up to Wyoming from Colorado, and he had a small amount of marijuana in his pocket, and the vehicle that he borrowed from the friend smelled like burnt marijuana. And so the officer, just said, "Hey, I think I smell marijuana. Do you have any illegal controlled substances in the vehicle?" And he ended up, saying, "Well, actually, I do have some marijuana in my pocket," and handed it over to the officer.
All right, so pausing there in the story, we've done other videos about don't talk to the police. Would that have been a good thing for him to do at this point, not talk to the police?
Well, I would definitely say in that situation, I'd really rather not discuss my business with you, rather not discuss my day, and I need to help you out with anything else related to the speeding ticket. I'd be glad to answer any questions there, but I just don't want to discuss my business. And that's, what I would recommend he would have done in this situation.
But of course, he didn't do that. So he shows the officer that he has marijuana, but I'm sensing the story doesn't end there.
No, so, basically then the officer has probable cause to search his entire vehicle. He hands over the marijuana, and the officer just says, "Okay, well, I'm going to need to search the rest of your vehicle." And so he has a couple other backup officers who show up, and keep in mind the vehicle is, full of all of the stuff that he's trying to move. So the officers spend, a good amount of time going through everything, and it's only at the last minute that they come across a large amount of mushrooms, illegal mushrooms, and they're tucked in between the driver's seat and the center console. And they asked my client about the mushrooms, and he says, "I have no idea whose they are. I'm actually borrowing this vehicle from a friend to move, and I didn't know they were there."
So he gets, okay, I'm sure from the police's point of view, this sounds like he's lying and just saying that's not mine. And, but it sounds like he was really telling the truth. He actually didn't know it was there. But then does he get charged with something at that point?
Right. So he had sold, remember, a bunch of his property prior to coming up to Wyoming. And so, he had like $2,300 in cash. And so with the combination of $2,300 in cash and a large amount of mushrooms, the officers charged him with possession of mushrooms with the intent to distribute.
Wow. Which is, is that two separate charges, possession and intent to distribute, or is it one sort of large charge?
Well, in this particular case, so a lot of times what you see, that is one large charge, but they also charge you with a felony possession of mushrooms. So he's charged with 2 felonies plus the misdemeanor marijuana when he comes to our office to get help.
So he comes to your office to get help, and how does this unfold? Does it go to trial?
It does end up going to trial. We're not able to negotiate a deal in this particular case because our client had a prior drug felony, and so the prosecutor wasn't willing to negotiate into any lesser type of offense or any sort of sentencing recommendation that we could agree to. They wanted to send my client to prison, so yes, we went to trial.
And then how did it turn out?
Well, I mean, we were able to get a not guilty verdict because all the state had in this particular case was the large amount of cash and the large amount of mushrooms, but there was no other evidence of his intent to, distribute this or that he was drug trafficking. And a lot of times there's, circumstantial evidence, maybe scales and baggies that show, he intends to weigh and break up the large amount and then sell it. And that was not present. And they searched his phone. They couldn't find any, messages saying he was going to sell it or people asking him if he had any drugs to sell. And so it really came down to he had a large amount of drugs and cash, and so they assumed he was, trafficking drugs. But in this particular case, we were able to convince a jury that these two things don't show his intent alone. That's not enough. But also, he did not know that the drugs were in his vehicle, and he said that the drugs were not his. So, we were really able to stack on the defenses, and ultimately, the jury found him not guilty.
That's really good news, and it sounds like it is a story that's pretty easy to believe when you add up all those pieces. So if someone is facing some drug charges and potentially facing prison time, they're going to need a lawyer. So how do they get a hold of you?
Sure, we'll include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.